Te pewe ne ala kakoke, awa hanungi pekondeke. Che chakokwa wainswane, ni limita senia miakuya. I just said, hello. It's good to see all of you here this evening. My name is Diane Hunter. I am a citizen of the federally recognized Miami tribe of Oklahoma, and I am honored to serve my nation as Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Now, just the other day, someone said to me, that's a really long title. And I thought maybe I should just start by explaining what it is I do as Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. As you probably are aware, after World War II, in the 1950s and 60s, there was a lot of construction going on in this country. A lot of interstate roads were built, a lot of dams were built, and by the mid-1960s, they realized we have destroyed a lot of historic places in doing this construction. And as a result, Congress passed the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966. The act provided, among other things, for state historic preservation officers for each state, and for tribal historic preservation officers to serve the same goals as the state historic preservation officers on tribal land, and also to protect areas of importance to the tribe. And so my role as Tribal Historic Preservation Officer is to protect and preserve places of historic and cultural importance to the Miami people. Mitame miamiake nipangonje sakachewechike. At first, the Miami came out of the water. That's how the earliest story that we have begins. It's the story of the Miami people, our emergence as a distinct and different people onto Miami-ongi, the land of the Miami. And this is the land of the Miami. Our story begins at Sakacheweonge, near the St. Joseph River in northwestern, what is now northwestern Indiana. My great-grandfather, Wapanaki Kapwa, also known as Gabriel Godfroy, believed that Sakacheweonge was on the St. Joseph River at what's now South Bend. Many people today believe it was probably closer to where the St. Joseph empties into Lake Michigan. In any case, that's where we began as Miamiaki, the Miami people. We had a village there, and then we moved on and had another village, or perhaps a camp, that we called Mishiwiatehe, Elk Heart. Elkhart, yes. From there, we went on to establish a number of villages. Our largest and best known is Kikeonge, which is in what is now known as Fort Wayne. And then we established villages all along the Wapashiki-Sipiwe, the Wabash River, yes. And so those were our villages, mostly in this area in northern Indiana. But all of this is Miami-ongi, because we didn't just stay in our villages. We went out beyond our villages to hunt and to fish and to gather. And especially in the wintertime, we would move out of our villages about 4 months of the year in the winter. We would be away from our villages and on hunting parties. And we would sometimes go west, but sometimes we would come south. So it's entirely possible that we're standing where our ancestors once hunted in the winters. We also would sometimes go south to fight with other tribes that were coming up from the south. So though we didn't generally live where we are now, we certainly very likely were here from time to time. But Miami-Yangi, the land of the Miami, is vital in sustaining our community. Our language and culture are essential in preserving our unique worldview, our indigenous knowledge system, so that future generations know who they are and what our identity as a people is. And that identity is intrinsically tied to the places that we call home, both historically and today. Yes?
You know, the map there that you're depicting in that time period, how many, like 10,000 people? What kind of population were there?
Before contact with Europeans, about 30,000 Miami. So I want to talk a little bit about what village life was like. And what I'm talking about really is up until the 19th century. So up until about 1800 is what I'm going to be describing for you. Men and women had distinct roles. Men had their job, women had their job. The men's role was outside the village. The men were responsible for hunting and fishing. The men did the trading, initially with other tribes, and then later with Europeans when they came on the scene. The men made war, and they made peace. The men chose a civil chief and a war chief from men who showed leadership qualities. They were not elected, but they were chosen based on their qualifications. The women, their realm was within the village. We also had a female chief and a female war chief, and they were chosen by the women of the village. The women built the Wickiami. This is not a Miami Wickiami, it's a Kickapoo, but ours would have looked very much like that. Those are reeds, cattail reeds, that are woven into mats to make the Wickiami. But the women made, I should mention too, because the women, maybe not because, but the women made the Wickiami, they owned the Wickiami. And gentlemen, I am sorry to say, if you came home one day to find your moccasins outside the door, you'd better find a new place to live. But the women made the things we need: clothes, pottery, basketry, weapons. We farmed corn. Each village had a cornfield, and there are records of American soldiers later commenting that they had never seen such large cornfields. We have our own corn. It's called minjipe, and it is unique to the Miami people. And it's a corn that makes a very fine flour, and so it was a valued trade item because others wanted the flour. We didn't give them the corn because we didn't want them to grow it, but we would trade the flour. Each family had its own garden. They would grow beans, squash, melons. I find it very interesting with the melons. We cut them, we sliced them, and then dried them, and then we'd have them to eat all year round. We also gathered wild plants, roots. We liked lily pads, milkweed, and of course the women then prepared all these foods that they grew and gathered. I mentioned that the women made the clothing and really made the objects that we used. And from very early on, we had distinctive ways of decorating our clothes, our objects, even our bodies. And we particularly liked diamond patterns. In the 18th century, one of the trade items that we got from the Europeans was silk ribbons. And at first, when the men brought home these silk ribbons, the women would sew them on, like on the bottom of a garment or on a blanket, kind of like we would do today. But then they began to think, we make diamond patterns. Here's some examples of diamond patterns that we made. This is a bison robe, and you can see the diamonds in there?
What's on the side that you keep continually?
Oh, that is an example of ribbon work, and I'm going to tell you in just a moment, yeah. This was a basket where they wove the threads into, can you see the diamonds in there? But when they got these silk ribbons, they thought, we could do amazing patterns in diamonds, in these geometric shapes with these ribbons. And so they figured out how to cut the ribbons and fold them and sew them into amazing patterns that became uniquely Miami. And I want to just quickly show you some examples. Yes, this piece along the side here is a pattern that our ancestors made. This is a pair of moccasins, and you see the diamond patterns there? And I want to show you up close. Now, think about how big a foot is, and probably much smaller than our feet today. And then think how many rows of these diamonds there are. Those diamonds are probably no more than a 1/4 inch across. Very detailed, very delicate work. This is a piece of ribbon work that right now is at the Indiana State Museum. I think it's there for another month. So if you go up to the museum in the next month, you can see this pattern. Here's another design that was made with the diamond patterns, another design. So you can see they were very creative in doing different patterns. And then still another pattern. And these are just a few examples of the kinds of patterns that we made. This is a picture of my great-grandparents, Gabriel Godfrey Wapanaki Kapwa, and his wife, Martha Jane, also known as Jenny. And look at Gabe's leggings. You see the ribbon work down the sides of his leggings? And look at her skirt, down the side and around the bottom of her skirt, the ribbon work. Now I want you to look at this piece. This is a piece that is in the Milwaukee Public Museum. We believe it's that same piece that Jenny is wearing in that picture.
Where is it?
In Milwaukee Public Museum. Our ribbon work is everywhere now. By the 1900s, times were hard, and a lot of people sold their ribbon work because they needed to. And so most of what is left from that time period is in museums.
So your grandparents, great-grandparents, where did they live?
In near Peru, Indiana.
Right.
Yeah.
That's Miami County.
Yes, Miami County, exactly. So ribbon work kind of fell away for a while in the 1900s. It was sold, people forgot how to make it. Not everybody, but it was kind of becoming a lost art until the 1990s. And now it's starting to revive, and we are doing all kinds of things. This is Danya Williams is our first council person on our business committee, and this is her regalia. And you can see it's the same kind of patterns, but much more modern colors that they wouldn't have had available to them 200 years ago. These are ribbon shirts that are commonly worn by men. These are examples of, as our young people are learning, they're putting ribbon work on whatever. You can kind of tell this one was made by a young man. And one of our young men has put it on his cell phone case. So ribbon work is an example of how those the men's roles and the women's roles worked together and how both were vital. The men did the trading, so they are the ones that traded for the ribbons, brought the ribbons home. The women made the ribbons into these intricate ribbon work designs. Both men and women wore ribbon work, particularly for special occasions. It wasn't the kind of thing, it took a lot to put into it. You were going to wear it to work in the cornfield. But so the women made the ribbon work. The men were also responsible for making peace treaties and peace agreements. Now, you never went to a peace treaty without taking gifts. Who made the gifts? The women. What do you think would happen if the women didn't want them to make peace? They didn't give them the gifts to take. And if the women didn't want the men to go to war, they didn't supply them to go to war. So though each had their own roles, they worked together, and both had a role in the decision-making in the community. Now, the ribbon work obviously was something that happened after our contact with the Europeans. But the rest of this is pretty much what was like before contact. And our lives shifted dramatically after that first contact with Europeans. Our first contact with them was through disease and through trade goods. And a big impact of their appearance on the scene was the Beaver Wars around 1650. And we were driven from Miami-Ongi, from our homes in Indiana, into northern Illinois and all the way up to the Green Bay, Wisconsin area. And that's where we first encountered the French missionaries, the Jesuits, and some French fur traders and traders as well there. But by the end of the century, by 1700, we were able to return to our homelands, and we continued to have further interaction with the French and later with the British. After the American Revolutionary War, we entered into a series of wars with the Mishimalsake, the Americans. And we had a number of wars until the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794, and the Treaty of Greenville the following year, 1795. Now, up to this point, those village chiefs spoke for their village. They led their village to war. But you know, the United States found it really difficult negotiating with so many, not only many tribes, but even within our tribe, so many different chiefs. And even though we started having maybe one or a few leaders represent several villages, as Little Turtle did at the Treaty of Greenville, we began to recognize we needed a principal chief who would be chief of all the Miami. And as a result of that, Pinjewa, Chief Jean-Baptiste Richardville, became the first principal chief of the Miami. Richardville was an astute businessman and political negotiator, and he negotiated the best he could for the Miami people. He had a plan to acquire land, a lot of land, in his own name. He understood that Americans were about private land ownership, as is still true today. And so he felt like if he could acquire lots of land in his name, then the Miami people could all stay on his land. And unlike other tribes at that time, they would not have to be removed from their homeland. Well, we'll talk in a moment about what happened with that. But after the Treaty of Greenville, we really didn't want to fight anymore. We just wanted peace, and that was our goal. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat his name for me, please?
Pinjewa is his Miami name, and it's P-I-N-S with a wedge over the top, I-W-A. So we were trying to avoid any more fighting with the Mishimalsake. And then came the War of 1812. The Americans wanted us on their side. The British wanted us on their side. We didn't want to be on either of their sides. We just wanted to be neutral and be left alone. And so we went to a village on the banks of the Mississinawa River and joined some Delaware there who also wanted to remain neutral. But the US government did not want us to remain neutral. They didn't trust that we would remain neutral. And so the US Army attacked our village, burned the village, and took women and children captive. At that point, there was no choice. We were in battle to rescue our women and children. But that was the last of the wars for us. And that was 1812. And as I'm sure you are very aware right now in this bicentennial year, just 4 years later, in 1816, Indiana became a state. Now, you can claim that Indiana became a state in 1816 because you are located down here. The rest of this was not yet part of Indiana. The rest of that still belonged to us and to other tribes. But after 1816, we started ceding land in treaties. We just wanted peace. The Americans wanted land. It was a good trade, we thought. There had actually been a treaty in 1809 before Indiana became a state. And then there were treaties in 1818, 1826, 1828, 1834, 1838, and 1840. Now, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Doug Pecange, and he's going to tell you what happened as a result of that treaty of 1840.
Hai cheke, te pewe neila koke, ala me kamwa, wainswa ane. Nila miamia nehe meshengo meshe ewe makeke. Hello everyone, it's good to see you all. My name is Doug Pecange. I am a citizen of the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I am the Assistant Historic Preservation Officer for the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma. Along with that, I'm also the tribe's Community Programming Manager in Fort Wayne. Diane talked to you about Miami culture, our history, where we came from, and a little bit about the loss of our lands. And I like to think that we're not trapped in the past. Tonight, I'm going to pick up the string where Diane had set it down, beginning with the Treaty of 1840 and ending with where the tribe is today. In 1840, we signed a treaty with the United States government, and in that treaty, we agreed to cede our last remaining homelands in Indiana for lands in Kansas. Part of that agreement was the government was going to give us 5 years to remove ourselves to Kansas. And like Diane had described, Pinjawa had a plan of his own for us to stay here. And we put off our removal for as long as we could. And it wasn't until the United States Army had showed up with soldiers in the area, rounding up those to go west. With the thought of violence occurring, we relented to the government's wishes and began that process. October 6, 1846, we started that process. It started in Peru, Indiana, as approximately 300 Miamis were loaded onto canal boats. Some of those Miamis, as they were being loaded onto canal boats, were actually seen reaching down, grabbing handfuls of dirt to take with them. Now, they weren't taking cookware or personal personal items with them. They were taking dirt. And they were taking dirt because this was the last time they were ever going to be in their homeland. They knew that they were never coming back here. They were going to someplace they'd never been to. They had no idea what was waiting for them there. Starting October 6th, they left Peru. The next day, they arrived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where more Miamis were loaded onto canal boats. They then went further up the Wabash Erie Canal to Defiance, Ohio, where they transferred down to the Miami Erie Canal. And from there, they took that canal system down to Cincinnati, Ohio, where they arrived in Cincinnati about October 11th. Now, when they got there, actually, I want to read this to you. This comes from the Cincinnati Gazette on October 13th, 1846. It's the daily receipts from that canal boat. 134 barrels of whiskey, that's quite a bit. 10 sacks of 115-pound wool, 8 barrels of varnish, 2 Indian ponies, Miami Indians, 225 over and 78 under the age of 8 years old, 49 perch stones, 4 pigs, and 1 barrel of salt. Now, our ancestors on this journey west, they weren't considered passengers. They were part of the things that were being removed from that canal. So they left October 12th on the steamboat Colorado down the Constanza Peewee, which you may know, be more familiar with as the Ohio River. They traveled the Ohio River up the Mississippi River to what we refer to as Bloody Island, which sits actually directly across from the St. Louis Arch. Now, in their travels from Cincinnati to St. Louis, we had 2 of our ancestors had perished on that journey, and they are buried there on Bloody Island. They remained in St. Louis for a couple days, and the reason they did was it took a while to find another steamboat to take them up the Missouri River. The Missouri River was a shallower river and can be very treacherous for those steamboats to travel. A lot of steamboats were sunk on that Missouri River. They left out of St. Louis October 23rd, traveled up the Missouri River, and stopped in the Constanza Landing, which is close to Kansas City, present-day Kansas City. From there, they walked roughly 50 miles south to Sugar Creek, Kansas, arriving there between November 2nd and November 3rd. Now, when they arrived there wasn't any army barracks set up waiting for them to move in. The government gave them tents, and we had roughly 300 Miami citizens that basically spent the winter on the prairie in a tent. So the spring rolled around, and one interesting thing about the spring. Now in Indiana, buffalo, I think the last buffalo was seen in the 1820s. But in the spring, the men organized a buffalo hunt out on the prairie. And I think this is amazing because if you think about it, it had been 25 years or so since the last buffalo was seen in Indiana, and who knows how long it had been since they actually were able to kind of conduct a buffalo hunt. But these our ancestors, they still remembered how to do that. So it was very, very interesting. That spring, Chief LaFontaine, who had traveled with the Miamis, returned back to Indiana, and unfortunately, on his journey back to Indiana, he had passed away. After he had left, our ancestors in Kansas, immediately after he had left, elected a new chief. And then not too long after we had settled into a village there, the United States government decided that they wanted to take the tribe's land and divide it up amongst its citizens. This basically left the tribe with no land base. It was dispersed amongst all the citizens. Another interesting point about our tribes and chiefs, like Diane commented, our chiefs prior to the 1800s, those were kind of a collective kind of agreement of, we understand you are our leader. And once we got to Kansas, it was actually an elected position. So the chief, Unzandia, was elected once LaFontaine left. In the 1860s is the first, I believe it's the first recorded time that women were allowed to vote in elections. So if you think about when women were able to attain the right to vote here in the United States, we were way ahead of the curve when it came to that. We remained in Kansas for roughly 20, 25 years. After the Civil War had ended, there was again this rush of Americans going west, and Kansas was this rich land for farming. And once again, the United States government felt that this land would be better used if it was used by Americans moving west. Again, we chose peace over war and relented to their wishes and ceded our lands in Kansas for lands in the Indian country of Oklahoma. Now this point in time, it's another tough decision for our ancestors, because they had a choice in Kansas. They could stay and become citizens of the United States of America, or they could move to Kansas and remain citizens of the Miamis, remain a Miami citizen. 69 Miamis chose to relocate from Kansas to Oklahoma. Chief Thomas Miller was the chief at that time and helped settle our relatives in this new country. When we arrived in the Indian Territory, we were fortunate in the fact that, first of all, the Quapaws were gracious enough to allow us to settle on their lands. Furthermore, we were fortunate in the fact that our relatives from the Great Lakes had also settled in the same area. The Peorias, the Eastern Shawnees, the Senecas, the Shawnees, the Wyandottes, the Ottawas, had all settled in the same area. So we were comfortable with who we were around. Miami, Oklahoma became the headquarters for our tribal government, and still is today. Let's see here. These represent two Miami families that remained in Indiana. That 1840 treaty I was talking about, yes, the tribe as a legal entity was removed west to Kansas. However, there were 5 families that were allowed to stay in Indiana. The Godfrey family, the Richardville family, the Mishingo-Meshe family, the LaFontaine family, and the Francis Slocum family. Those 5 families were permitted to stay in Indiana. And even Mishingo-Meshe, which is my great-great-great-grandfather, he had gone to D.C. in 1854. And his purpose of going to D.C. in 1854 was to ensure that our family was still going to receive their annuity payments for the land acquisition in Indiana. But he acknowledged to the Indian agents that were negotiating on behalf of the United States government that in fact he was there just for his family, and that the representatives from Kansas were there to negotiate on behalf of the tribe. In the 1990s, the tribe opened its citizenship up from, it was just people that seated in Oklahoma, and they opened it up to those that were granted allotments in Oklahoma. Because we had families that remained in Indiana and families that went to Oklahoma, it opened the door for Miamis that were in Indiana to join Oklahoma. I had another great-great-great-grandfather, Miziqua, who happened to be one of them that was actually put on a canal boat and made that trek west. And in the spring, he ended up coming back to Indiana. And he really wasn't supposed to be in Indiana. But he came back and was persistent and stayed in Indiana. And there are a lot of families in Indiana, like mine, that have a direct descendant that made that journey and opened the rolls up for us to join. And then there's other families that their direct line may not have necessarily gone, but they had an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or somebody else in their family that was forced to make that journey. Talk to you about a little bit about tribal sovereignty and our tribe itself. The sovereignty of federally recognized tribes, it's not always understood. It is federal recognition that gives us our sovereignty. This was accomplished through the treaty process. We negotiated government to government. Our tribal government negotiated with the government of the United States, again, ceding lands, reworking treaties from the past. Over time, though, those treaty periods ended, and there were other means of recognition by the United States government that arose. But it's the federal recognition that makes us a dependent sovereign nation with the right to a government-to-government consultation. Our tribal constitution, the governing body of the Miami tribe is its general council, which meets annually in Miami, Oklahoma. Our general council basically is the citizens of the tribe. The general council elects the business committee, which carries out the government business day to day. This picture here is our current business committee. Our Akima, which referred to as chief, is Doug Langford. Second chief is Dustin Olds. Sarah Moore is our treasurer secretary. Danya Williams is our first council person, and Scott Willard is our second council person. Now, our tribe in Oklahoma is very much its own entity, independent of the state. We have our own police department. We have our own court system. In Oklahoma, we even have our own auto tags. So if you live in Oklahoma, you can go to the tribe and purchase auto tags from the tribe itself. Miami Nation Enterprises. Miami Nation Enterprises is our political economic subdivision of the tribe. We own about 16 different companies. They range from a cabinet making company, a company that makes countertops, a construction company, a fencing company. We have a company that develops software as well. And then fiber optics has become a really big business, and we have one company that does the installation of the fiber optics, and then we have another company that puts the fiber optics in the ground. So trying to corner the market a little bit. We have an ambulance company in Ohio, and then in Miami, Oklahoma, we own the only movie theater in Miami. We have a couple restaurants there also, and a couple casinos as well. But those businesses are really what makes the opportunities for the tribe to succeed continue. And part of what they do helps with our cultural and language revitalization. In the 1960s, our last speaker of our language passed away, and there was nobody to carry the language on. So our language was kind of sat down or put down for a while. And it wasn't until the 1990s when David Costa and Darrell Baldwin began the process of revitalizing our language. Along with revitalizing our language, they helped with the revitalization of our culture as well. The tribe, recognizing how important and vital this is for not only the tribe but its citizens, started a relationship with Miami University over in Oxford, Ohio. And today, because of this relationship, we now have what's called the Miami Center that's right there at the university. It is our research hub for the tribe. It allows us to develop programs, materials, publications, and today even applications. They have developed an online dictionary for our cell phones. There's an app, a learning app for your cell phone. There's an online dictionary as well that you can get from your computer. These are the kind of tools that we've been able to provide our tribal citizens to help them relearn the culture and the language. Another part of our culture and language that we enjoy doing is kind of the gatherings, music, dance. Every winter we have a winter gathering. We have a winter stomp dance. And I guess the best way to kind of explain that, it's kind of like follow the leader, if you get that, and with some singing along to a beat that the women set. Traditionally, the women would wear turtle shells around their ankles with beads in them, and they would set the beat with the shaking, and then the men would sing their song. Our annual meeting, we would start off our annual meeting with what we refer to as a round dance song. And pretty much anybody and everybody that's able to get up and go out and do this, we all join hands and we just basically do a circle around the council house. And we do campouts, and we do some singing at campouts as well. Another thing we do in the wintertime is storytelling. Now we have two different types of stories. We have historical narratives, which is what I'm presenting to you today, and then we have winter stories. Now these are stories that we only tell in the wintertime. And I do have a story about why we tell stories in the winter, but I can't tell it to you because it's not winter yet. Storytelling is a big thing. With our children, we think it's very important for our children to learn their culture and their language. And the tribe has created 2 programs to help with that. One program is the Sakachiweta program, and that's for children from 5 years of age to 9 out in Miami, Oklahoma, and it's kind of part of a daycare program that the tribe has out there, where the kids will learn kind of simple things like, like numbers, and they have some fun songs that they learn to sing. And then we have our A1 Zapata program, and that's for kids from ages 10 to 16. And that's a little more in depth, that the kids learn a lot more language. They learn about how our ancestors used to live, how they used the environment. They learn about the different trees that we have, and like Diane was talking about, cattails and lily pads. Those are the type of things that the kids are learning in these camps, is what we use from the land. They do some fun things too, like learning how to build a wikiyami. Although it's not practical today to, live in a wikiyami, because I don't know about your guys' kids, but my kids would go crazy if they didn't have their, their Disney Channel and their Xbox. But it's still important for them to learn and understand the way it used to be, the way it was done. Games. Games is another important part of our culture. We actually use games to honor people. We use games to help people heal. If you have somebody in your family that perhaps isn't feeling well and you want to help them get better, and maybe lacrosse is their favorite game that they love to play. So you would gather together and play a lacrosse game to kind of help them feel better, to get better. If you have a family member that passes and perhaps there's a game that they truly enjoy playing, again, you gather to play that game in honor of that person that has passed on. The kids this summer, they learned how to make a traditional lacrosse stick. And those are a lot harder to play with than the modern sticks, I can tell you that. But they are a lot of fun to make. And again, I think it is important for us to understand how it was done. I don't think it's just, in today's world, it just doesn't make sense to go back to doing those traditional things per se, some of those things, just because it takes a tremendous amount of time. Those cattail mats can take a very, very long time to make. This is another game that we would play. You may know it, the modern version, as the shell game, of hiding the ball underneath the shell. We refer to it as the Makasina game. It's a fun game that we play today, and it was traditionally played. Another game we play is Senzawenge, or the Plumstone game. This would be considered a gambling game, but gambling in our ancestors' time versus gambling today is tremendously different. Today, when you gamble, you lose the house. Traditionally, when you would lose, whatever you lost kind of gets redistributed. So you lost, but you didn't really lose. It gets redistributed in the community. Archery is one of the activities that the Sakachiweta kids get to participate in Oklahoma. They really enjoy going out and shooting at the targets. And now I want to talk to you about our office in Fort Wayne. This is where Diane and I both work. Our primary, or at least our primary purpose for this property is our community. We have roughly 500 tribal citizens living up in the Fort Wayne area. And we focus on giving them opportunities to come together as a community. Opportunities to come together as a community, opportunities to learn about their culture, opportunities to learn the language. But we don't just stop there. We use that office to also work with state and local agencies as well, local volunteer groups. And then we also do community outreach to educate communities outside of our own about the Miami tribe as well. So today, you've learned about Miami culture, history, and our homelands, and our tribe today. Our ancestors considered all of Indiana as part of our homelands. We survived wars, treaties with the United States government, and removal west. 300 tribal citizens were removed to Kansas, and then 69 were removed to Oklahoma. Today, our tribe has over 5,000 citizens living in 47 different states. We value our past, and we honor those who came before us. However, we choose to live in the present rather than to be trapped in the past. And this is what I think makes us a strong and vibrant nation. Okay. If anybody has any questions for Diane and myself. Yeah.
Does your cultural center have places to help people find Native American ancestors? I was helping my sister-in-law, and I just ran into, I couldn't find anything. His name was the same name as an Indian agent.
Yeah.
It seemed like
Well,
everybody was named with that.
Fort Wayne has one of the best genealogy
But
departments.
I've never studied Native, but they have Native American there too?
The Allen County Public Library.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've been there, but I haven't been there for that purpose.
Yeah, and I would say the primary focus of our building is to serve our tribal citizens and their needs.
Okay.
If you think that the ancestry is specifically Miami, we may be able to help you.
I don't think she
But-
knows.
But otherwise, we don't really
Yeah.
help beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
And Miami controlled it, had Indiana as their homeland. Who were the Potawatomis?
The Potawatomi was another tribe. The Miami went pretty much up to the Wabash River. I mean, we went beyond, but that was kind of considered Miami. And then north of the Wabash River and into what's now Michigan were the Potawatomi. There are several Potawatomi bands that went west. There still is one band left in Michigan, northern Indiana.
Yeah, and I will say too, our homelands, it was a shared landscape. It wasn't like you would think today where, this is the state of Indiana and you do not, if you're from Illinois, don't you dare cross over into Indiana. It was shared. We had the Shawnee that lived with us. As a matter of fact, Kikianga, the Shawnee had a village there, and the Delaware had a village there as well.
What about the Pecange?
There was a Leesville, there was an Indian attack of Potawatomis in Leesville way back in about 1816 or something.
Yes, because we all went red.
Yeah, everybody went out.
Yeah.
The other question, in your crafts and weavings and et cetera, did anyone ever mention the leatherwood, bush?
Haven't heard about leatherwood bushes.
Well, it was used, somebody said the Indians used it to make baskets and tie things together and strip the bark off of it, et cetera. And we have a Leatherwood Creek here. So,
You were asking?
Pecange.
The Pecange, when I talked about the fact that we had villages, from all the way down the Wabash. The group that stopped near what's now Lafayette became the WIA. They were Miami, but they were known as the WIA. And then as they went down near Vincennes, in that area, they were the Pecange. And so they were originally Miami, but because we lived in separate villages, over time they kind of separated. And once we started negotiating treaties and getting annuities from the government, they separated completely so that we got our annuities, they got theirs. They are now the WIA and the Pecange are now part of the Peoria tribe. The Peoria has a number of Illinois tribes, and the WIA and the Pecange all are part of that tribe.
I have a question about the man who was trying to buy the land so you could stay. What happened with that land?
They didn't allow it.
Yeah.
The government just didn't allow it. No.
Yeah.
No, it was, they were going to have us removed, and they only let the immediate, brothers and sisters of those 5 men were not allowed. Only them and their descendants were allowed to stay.
So he did want a lot of land, he just couldn't let anybody else stay?
Yes, there were two leaders who acquired a lot of land, and the idea was, okay, between the two of them, they'll have enough land for everybody, but the government came with their guns and everybody had to go.